Good morning. We'd like to call the December 2025 SANDAG Audit Committee meeting to order. Before we get started, I'd like to ask our interpreter to introduce themselves and walk through how to access our interpretation services. Interpreter, go ahead.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish flow in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares en la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and the homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From our four cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Digweño, the Lisweño, the Copeño, and the Coahuila. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditions, our traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do you want to confirm with Francesca that we do have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum this morning.
Fantastic. It's good to have everybody around the table today. Sometimes audit committee is a little bit short on attendance, but today we have a lot going on, so it's good to have everybody here. Just as we wrap up this year, I just want to say thank you to the SANDAG staff, especially for Emily and Courtney for guiding us along. A year ago, I'd never think that I'd be here chairing the audit committee, but it's been a great journey so far, and I look forward to next year of learning even more. So we move on. Do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Thank you. We do. We have two. I will start with Purita Javier and Cesar Javier. And then we'll go to Blair Beekman online.
Good morning. I am Purita Javier, senior with existing medical condition and victim of ceramics kiln toxicity next door since 1997. Hazardous home business at 5238 Streamview Drive, San Diego, California, 92105 since 1984 in a residential zone community. Since 2022, we voice our community problem on foremost ceramics kiln toxicity with the APCD, and up to this moment, no action has not been taken. Why? The leadership is not selected or voted by San Diegans. Its mission is simply to ensure clean air for all, meaning for the rich rich and poor San Diegans. It has taxes to achieve its goal, namely, number one, air quality, number two, number two is health. Community engagement, number four, environmental justice, number five. Lately, as it implements CEQA, climate change action, APCD.
Good morning, Cesar. It's coincidental, and I believe this is divine intervention because this meeting is all about monitoring. And we would like to present to the board or to the thinkers that APCD is one of the guided planners on projects, etc., because of this environmental impact report, CEQA environmental impact report. APCD governance is run by Director Paulo Parvis. And you know what? First meeting 2025, closed session, increase in pay. Along with her leadership, APCD is run by 11 governing board, political heavy, 8 politicians, and 3 professionals. This agency mission ought to be science-based. APCD has 6 departments and workforce employees whose salaries are coming from the county. We learned that APCD was on its transition in 2022, and the vintage rules, codes are with them. And there was some kind of audit almost every 3 years, just like any other governance. And still our enemy, which is the exemption of 20 industrial and manufacturing activities, are still there. If ever there are changes, it's just very stingy. The codes, rules, 10, 11 are
Thank you
vintage.
very much. Your time has expired. Our final speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. I'm up in the San Francisco Bay Area and doing my work, cleaning my storage space, and attending the public meetings of San Jose and Oakland, their transit committee meetings up here, and I guess a big thing I'm trying to consider and how to better talk about is that we've really been working on our crime issues in the Bay Area, and I think in San Diego County too. It's related. The use of technology has been a lot of help, and that crime levels are really down. And I think we've really proven to the Trump administration, California can handle its own. And we're doing our own good work. And it's nice. That allows us a bit of freedom and choices in how to consider issues. And so we're at that plateau right now. We're at that space where we have future choices to make about what are we going to do with our law enforcement, our technology in our communities. I hope we can be considering, this is what I want to try to work on. I don't quite know how to say yet, but I want to work on, I hope we're working on humanistic ideas, to use that word, and not just more and more law enforcement to solve our crime issues. That we've reached a plateau. I hope we can be considering our better selves as how to make our future upcoming decisions about how to deal with law enforcement and crime. Just something to think about is how I'm considering life right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Are there any member comments? No? Seeing this time, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Mario for his update.
Thank you. I think the very first thing I want to do is apologize. We're starting at 9:30. Rules, regulations mentioned that agenda needs to be posted 72 hours in advance, and we missed the mark by 30 minutes. So that's why we're starting at 9:30. Again, my apologies. It's on me, but we'll also work that we don't cut it that close the next time we hit the send button. On updates, I would like to just mention currently we're focusing on closing out the 2018 Transnet recommendations. We'll submit to ITALK for implementation consideration by the end of the year. I think that's very, very important also with the ITALK committee. Also, we're pushing out a procurement next month to complete an assessment of our human HR department. And I think today we're going to be talking about the assessment for the finance department, and I truly, truly appreciate it. We'll discuss it more. I truly appreciate the roadmaps for success and all the in-depth conversations we had. But we need to work on. We are also have put out an assessment for our toll ops organizational structure. And we'll be going department by department, partnering with OIPA on the ones that they can do and the ones that we do on our side, but it all with the spirit of getting better this organization in this journey that we have undertaken. It's important, the HR is important, the toll ops assessments, because next year a lot of policy discussions will be occurring on the managed lanes and Otay Mesa East and business practices, as well as looking and evaluating systems, procedures, how other partners are dealing with all those facilities, and how we can learn and how we can morph or move towards those more traditional models on those upcoming facilities, and who knows, maybe even on our existing facilities and getting better. So that's very important. I also want to report on a Smart Road Incentives program. Last month, we notified the board and your city managers that there were some errors in the way the grants were ranked or scored. So that went into reevaluation. As a result, there were no changes to the project rankings on the planning and climate action planning grants. So those ones are coming to the Transportation Committee today for recommendation. And we will also be talking to Executive Committee on the capital projects and presenting a couple of strategies on them, on how to proceed with the capital ones on the rankings. And just want to remind everybody that SANDAG offices are closed on December 25th and January 1st. And that concludes my update.
Thank you, Mario. Sure appreciate it. We're going to go into item 2.2, an update from the Office of the OIPA. Go ahead, Ruby. Auditor Ruby.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. Good morning. I'm Courtney Ruby. I'm the Independent Performance Auditor, and I'm happy to give you an update. So we will be presenting the independent assessment of finance and accounting today. So we've been working on that since you last saw us on November 14th to get that finalized. We successfully completed our peer review. So who audits the auditor? Well, the Association of Local Government Auditors audit us. They came in on November 17th through November 21st and performed their evaluation and tested our files and everything so that you can rely on our work, and we'll be presenting that at the next audit committee. But I just wanted to let you know and give a shout out also to Jennifer Estrada, senior auditor with our shop. She was a liaison for the peer review and just did an excellent job. We have our quarterly cap that we're going to present today. So that definitely took a little bit more work than anticipated. When we promised to do the quarterly cap, every time we initiate something new, it takes time to format and really think about through your eyes what you would like to see. So we're looking forward to presenting that today and getting your feedback. We've been involved in trainings. We're doing our next OIPA's Whistleblower Hotline Holiday Open House on the 17th of December with treats and trivia and going over how to file a whistleblower report online. So that'll be fun. And then, of course, audits. We have our bike audit going on. We have our asset management audit going on and all the work that is normally going on. And we're looking forward to make sure that we execute on the audit plan. So the last thing I'd like to say in my update is today is Emily Mullen's last day as our associate administrative analyst, her last full day. And I just want to say that she's going off to a great opportunity at SANDAG. So thankfully, we're not losing her, and they're so fortunate to have her. I want to express my deep appreciation. Emily joined in May of 2024. That was shortly after we issued SR 125 investigation. It was a chaotic and challenging time for us, and she was responsible for solidifying the administrative structure, contracts, and more, and she hit the ground running. She always jumped into additional projects, and while I could go on and on about the various projects she's worked on and all the ways that she's assisted us, I do want to call out two things. Our first annual CAP report. Emily not only jumped in to format the information, she jumped in also to help with reviewing evidence, and she was a force in that report, also leading a lot of the efforts around that to keep us organized and on track. So I just want to acknowledge her for that. And then she capped off with her online dashboard, which is so impressive. So while we're super sorry to see her go and we wish her the very best in her career again, we're glad that she's going to be in the SANDAG family and to continue to grow her career. So thank you, Emily. That concludes my update.
Thank you, Courtney. Emily, thanks for all you've done. And I agree. I'm glad that she's staying in the same building, helping another team. So do we have any public comments, Francesca?
We do have one, Cesar Javier.
Thank you, SANDAG. We have been acquainted with National City Council meeting, and it is very, again, propitious for us to learn from SANDAG's performance as far as determining the services performance of SANDAG's implementers. We learn about who audit, the auditor that audited. We learn also about electronic whistleblower process or system. Of the various projects, which one or two could provide us lessons for planning and good, better, best implementation? We have been many years doing all about this circulation mobility, which is the prime mission of SANDAG. We ask this question because we want to learn from it and have it used in our city of San Diego Council meeting as public, inputters, learners, and teachers. We will not erase from our thought our daily sufferings and pains as San Diegans from the core city elected officials' performance. And that's the truth. And as we voice, pardon us, but this is still within performance service. We are failed. We do not deserve the way they govern us.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. I know Vice Chair has a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment again on the same appreciation of Ms. Emily. I'm glad that you will remain within SANDAG. You're very professional, and I appreciate all of the help that you've given me throughout the audit committee time that I've had here, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on the SANDAG. Thank you.
Any other board comments? No? All right, we're going to head on to the consent calendar. Approval of the meeting minutes. Do we have any public comment?
We do not have any public comment on consent.
Any member comments? No? Do I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve the consent calendar items.
I second.
Okay. Go ahead and vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Great. We're going to move on to item 4.1, which is the independent assessment of SANDAG's Accounting and Finance Department. Courtney, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Weaver. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Tanis, engagement partner at Weaver, Rima Parapilli, partner and subject matter IT advisor, and Holly Hart, director and the project manager for this engagement. I would like to give a little background to why this report is before you. As stated before, when I first became IPA, I was immediately thrust into the investigation on SR 125. The investigation found ETAN's fast lane financial reporting could not be relied upon, and the Accounting and Finance Department lacked adequate internal controls, including proper review and supervision, to ensure SR 125 financial information was accurately recorded and reported. The investigation recommended an independent assessment of the Accounting and Finance Department's policies, procedures, and practices. The scope of work that was advertised is included in the transmittal letter in the report, and this is a scope of work that I wrote. It is from this scope of work that Weaver was awarded the work, and they have done an outstanding job on this assessment. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge SANDAG's accounting and finance and senior management for their patience, fortitude, and commitment to this assessment, in addition to budget management, project management, and other senior managers who jumped in on this assessment to assist in the process. Management released their response separately on Monday. We received it at the same time as you did. They are in agreement with all 48 recommendations, and we will meet with them separately to go through the response and seek clarification where it is needed. So with that, I will turn it over to Weaver to present the report, and then after that, management will respond.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning, Audit Committee Chair and members of the Audit Committee, along with management for SANDAG. It is our pleasure to be here to present on this today. Of course, doing an accounting and finance independent assessment like this is a time-consuming endeavor, but definitely a lot of value. And definitely we will explain through the procedures we performed that this was a very collaborative engagement. Worked closely with management to really understand the environment and go through next steps. And so with our leadership here today, these were some of our key leaders of the team, but also supported by a very large team that was here and an integrated team focusing on the process assessment along with the IT assessment, since this included a heavy IT components with your ERP system. And Reba will be able to speak on many of those matters along with Holly and I on the process side. And so when we talk about the assessment and really what's the difference between an assessment and a typical internal audit, for example, in a typical internal audit, your plan definitely is focused on the risk-based plan. We focus a lot more on internal controls, do detailed tests of effectiveness, and then provide typically some more high-level recommendations for management to consider to really address the risk. Here, in this type of assessment, was a collaborative, really assessment looking for efficiencies, effectiveness. How do we really look at the current state and get to future state by working closely with management to have detailed recommendations to get to that future state? And so through here, this comprehensive assessment, we really were looking at the operating effectiveness, identifying what those deficiencies are, and strengthening safeguards over our assets, our processes, assessing coordination for effective reporting and communication to our stakeholders, including you all on this audit committee. So within that, we looked at specific in-scope processes. And I know if you referred to the report, you've probably all been able to dive into. You will see the very detailed procedures and the results that are many, many pages. But I would tell you that the length of that report really shows the level of work and collaboration that was done to identify really where we are and where we want to be. So in our in-scope areas of the finance and accounting department, we looked at accounting, finance, revenue, project control, and whole operations accounting. And we looked at those core functions, which including accounting and finance and revenue, financial reporting, project management, resource management, budget management, and change management. And again, the primary purpose of this assessment, much that Courtney wrote as the OPA, was to determine the current state of key organizational and operational functions and identify those opportunities to really improve our processes, our procedures, and along with our internal controls, those safeguards such as segregation of duties and so forth, and provide timely, accurate reporting to management, the board of directors, auditors, and other key stakeholders, including the public that relies on the information that is submitted by SANDAG. So underpinning the assessment was the consideration of how also the department's managing change that was associated with the transition to a new ERP system, which was Tyler Technologies, which is a very common technology system used in government entities, but definitely implementations vary. And when we have a new implementation, there's things that we used to doing before that may not operate the same way in the new system, and how do we get to that state to be able to continue to operate and use the efficiencies that a technology is supposed to give us in our daily work. And so we looked at the pre-transition as well as to the new back office tolling system. And so the next slide, we'll go further as we also did a detailed evaluation of an organizational structure and skills assessment. To really determine what are the current mix of roles, responsibilities, and skills that are really effectively supports the agency's operational and financial requirements. Many times we look to see, do we have the right people in the right places to continue to help us move forward? That includes skill sets, training, making sure that we are adequately staffed. There's a lot of different things that go into that OSSAA. But really to identify opportunities to enhance the effectiveness through alignment of the duties, improved role clarity, and potential streamlining of those responsibilities. We conducted a lot of interviews and walkthroughs with key finance and accounting managers to understand those roles, and also to look at staff utilization and review your organizational charts, job descriptions. What are the expectations of each one of those roles? And looking at performance documentation. Also going back to resumes, credentials, qualifications, experience, and really tenure in the role, which is also has to be considered how long somebody's had experience in that role, but also the previous experience they bring to the table. So with that additional focus area, we performed a variety of procedures to get to the conclusions we're going to talk about today. That including looking at your policies, procedures, internal controls, mapping those against industry benchmarks to see how are we compared to other governmental entities of similar size and function. We also conducted multiple interviews with stakeholders across finance and accounting and related departments on those processes to help validate and understand not just what is happening, but what do we see that there could be some challenges and how do we move forward. And looking again at the technology. Technology plays a key piece in everything we do. So looking at how we're using Tyler Technologies, also the IT general controls. We will talk more about that, but that also includes user access and making sure that we have all the right controls in place to protect our data and the information as we continue to move forward. And then looking through evidence and documentation of those in-scope areas to conduct our analyses and be able to deliver that to the finance department, where we talk through that in detail. Also compared those policies and procedures and controls to the COSO internal control framework, which is the industry framework that is followed for all auditors to really establish what control structure should look like. And then again, looking at your departmental structure. As a result of the assessment, and I'm about to turn it to Holly, who's going to dive us more into those results, we had 7 core themes of the current state. So again, current state, where we're at today, and then looking at where do we want to be. And that includes some very detailed recommendations and also a roadmap prioritization. And so of that, we had 18 observations associated with the recommendations, really into 4 groups, that including accounting and finance, budget grants, financial planning, enterprise resource planning system and change management, and then implementation planning and execution. So now I'm going to turn it over to Holly, who is going to go through the results.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that introduction. And again, I want to extend my gratitude as well to the management team for just their collaborative effort, their help in really understanding the complexities of SANDAG. You are a complex organization, and in order to take that deep dive, it was really critical to have their participation in our work, as well as executive management's commitment to continued improvement in SANDAG. All right, so as we move forward, we have it split out by the results. We're going to go into the recommended roadmap of the priority actions that are coming out of these results. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to go through a little bit more detail in the observations themselves, but we're going to cover those at a very high level. A lot of the details are already in your report, and so we want to be sure that we leave enough time for questions for you guys. All right. So the core themes that you'll notice in these results, this was our way to provide a high-level understanding of what are the key themes, the key results that came out of this assessment. And one of the things that you'll notice as you go through these core themes is that they really shined through each of the observations. You'll note multiple themes coming out of the observations and the results. And so this was our effort to try to provide a summary level result for you that encompasses a lot of what we found. And so I'll go through some of these. The first one being governance and oversight. And the reason this one is at the top is because it truly is foundational to everything else. As we know, governance is critical for really everything that SANDAG does. We did see that there is noted desire to continue to improve governance at SANDAG. That's a continuous process. However, there are definitely some opportunities to improve that governance and oversight, especially in the areas of budget ownership, ERP implementation, so just generally systems implementation and IT governance at SANDAG, as well as the core accounting controls that really establish the strengths and safeguards of your accounting and finance function. And so strengthening these areas will definitely continue to enhance oversight, ensure that reliable reporting that both the board, the stakeholders, that everyone's really looking for at SANDAG, and support that continuous improvement effort that management has already started. The second core theme here is policies, procedures, and internal controls. And if you read the report in the back, there was a laundry list of various controls and policies and procedures that we really dived into to analyze where are there some gaps, where are there some opportunities to continue to improve those controls. It's kind of an overarching theme in a lot of our results as well. So having clear and consistent procedures definitely is strong for that control environment. Controls are what really carry out the governance of the organization, right? So, we can have all the governance, but if we don't have the controls in place to really see that framework really work, then we're kind of fighting against ourselves. And so standardizing some of the areas that we looked at, reconciliation processes, for example, reimbursement processes, a lot of the ERP system implementation control, there's a lot of controls there that could be more consistent and standardized. And so we have outlined some of those in the report as well. The third one is regarding technology and systems integration. It got a special core theme outside of policies and procedures because of just how critical that process is from a governance perspective to really ensure that all of the great work that you guys are trying to do is supported through your various technology initiatives. And so Of course, once we move to a new ERP, there's always a lot of opportunity to really take a look at our business processes as well. And so key opportunity there, but there were some gaps in the requirements, making sure those requirements were carried through the process, validating to be sure that those requirements were met, ensuring that those critical IT general controls were incorporated within that system's implementation, and then making sure that the integration with the system and business processes was, trying to make sure that it really carries through all the various processes that the implementation touches. And so strengthening those requirements, make configurations and reporting capabilities will definitely enhance performance and reduce some of the manual workarounds that have resulted from the implementation. We are, I think you guys are maybe at the end of phase 2 or starting to get into phase 2. And so there's still a lot of opportunity to continue to work on our implementation effort as you continue through the phases of the ERP implementation, and also carry some of these themes throughout other implementations that you would work on in the future. Number 4 is always an area, core theme that's near and dear to my heart as somebody who's very much in the performance audit and management space. But the performance measurement and accountability aspect of these. There is opportunities for performance measurement in all areas, right? And so establishing clear performance metrics and actual monitoring of those metrics will definitely assist and strengthen accountability and improve financial management. There were some areas specifically in budget oversight and then the ERP governance frameworks that could use performance metrics that are not only established, but monitored, tracked, reported on, helping you guys to have really more fundamental qualitative and quantitative information of how things are going. And on the budget side, how are we doing against our budget? Are we using our budget? Are we over, under? If we're under budget, why are we under budget? And having more consistent information on how to track that, because there's just so much going on from a project management perspective that impacts budgets. And so having some performance metrics around that would be great. The next core theme, training and workforce development. Building a well-trained workforce, we know, critical to improving the effectiveness of the agency. It really touches on all these other aspects that we've touched on before. Currently, there were some areas that the intention on formal development could be improved. There are 3 pillars that we really looked at, and that's qualifications, experience, continued learning, all that good stuff. And so more emphasis on some of that workforce development would definitely be helpful in a lot of the areas, especially when it comes to that management layer that's really in charge, that first line of defense of making sure that our control framework is operating effectively. The 6th one is also a really big one. It's change management and communication, essential for everything else above to work as well. These are all very much integrated with each other. And so change management, not only from the perspective of changing technology platforms, but how our business processes change along with that. So there's 2 components, 2 sides of change management that we looked at, and both could benefit from more formalized, consistent change management, really looking at change management continuously through the process. I know that at the beginning, whenever you guys were setting up your implementation of the ERP, there was a lot of discussion about change management. We would have liked to see those themes carry forward throughout the implementation a little more strongly. And so helping that change management process definitely will strengthen technology adoption, reduce disruptions, enhance collaboration, make sure that our processes are also very much aligned with our systems implementation as we go. And then finally, roles, responsibilities, and collaboration. There's a lot of cross-departmental collaboration that goes on at SANDAG. It has to in order for it to work. You've got a lot of moving parts that require everybody, as our fearless leadership likes to say, going the same direction, going the right way. Everybody knows their roles and responsibilities. That's how we really make it to our goals and objectives. And so providing a little bit more clarity around some of those roles and responsibilities in each of the functions that we evaluated would be essential. We're going to talk a little bit about role establishing RACIs, responsibility, accountability, who's consulted, who's informed. The really going through the exercise of understanding who is responsible for what in each of these areas everybody knows they have responsibility, but does everybody knows everybody else's responsibility? And so those are the core themes that like I said, will definitely shine through the results in each of our observations and recommendations. And so keeping those in mind as you read the report is really hopefully helpful in keeping in mind what are the high level things that we really want to focus on. And then, all right. Along with these results, we did develop some priority actions and a roadmap. We thought this would be very helpful for executive management to start to formulate how they would tackle some of our recommendations. And so we were able to really boil down 48 recommendations into 10 priority actions. And so it's kind of a way for you guys to really focus on where should we start with all of this. And so the first one is standing up a unified internal controls and compliance framework. We start with this one, internal control, as we mentioned before, overarching importance for making sure that once we fix the problem, can we maintain consistency? Once we have decided this is what risk we're trying to mitigate, here's the controls that we want to put in place, how do we be sure that we maintain consistency around those controls? And not only that, but whenever external auditors or external folks come in from the organization, is there a way that we can readily show and evidence that we have these controls in place and we can build on these controls and we can continue to monitor and evolve and remediate gaps, because you don't just establish controls in one day and then never look at it again, right? It's a continuous process that we need to be looking at. And so standing up a control framework, we would recommend utilizing some support and resources from perhaps somebody external from the organization to come in and help with that framework, to support management in doing that. They've got a lot on their plates already. And so helping, having some help on that would be great. But once that's in place, it's, hopefully to maintain a framework that defines key controls, who's the ownership, what's the frequency of the control, and who's monitoring it. And again, this is a control framework that we would expect to see in all of the various core functions that we analyze. So there's in every core function that we looked at, having an internal control framework that is defined would be very beneficial for SANDAG. The second priority action, establishing a true technology and ERP governance infrastructure. Reema's going to talk a little bit more about ERP governance. However, again, a priority action is definitely setting up that qualified CIO equivalent within SANDAG to oversee not only an implementation, but also just the overall IT strategy, technology strategy of SANDAG. Implementation of system A, B, C, how all of those processes work together. How are we controlling, from a cybersecurity perspective? There's a lot that goes on there that really having a holistic CIO person that has that qualification would be very helpful in making sure that all those parts come together. And then 3, raise expectations for management competencies associated with the 3 pillars of qualifications that we assessed within our organizational assessment. Experience, education, and credentials, really a trifecta of our pillars of qualifications that would really stand up that strong, make sure that that management team continues to develop competencies, encouraging where appropriate and requiring pursuit of relevant professional certifications of leadership and those technical roles. Implementing centralized tracking of training and credentials. I know that there's been other areas where we've seen that some centralized tracking of how we are developing our workforce would really help SANDAG in identifying what do we need to do next in terms of workforce development. And just ensuring that there's quality training provided for specific technical roles in each of these areas. The 4th priority action here, tighten system implementation quality gates, requirements, traceability, testing, and go live criteria. This is really the nitty gritty of implementation, systems implementations. And this would include not only implementations, but when you're doing major updates or adding modules to systems. So there's just one implementation might be complete, but there's always continuous maintenance that's needed on a lot of the systems that we use. And so making sure that we understand our requirements for those systems, we've mapped those requirements to the various test cases before it goes live formalizing pre-go live validation so that everybody has a good understanding of what the requirement is for go live. It's defined, so we don't have to guess depending on what phase or module we're looking at. When we're ready to go live, we know exactly what the requirements are for that. Maintaining some checklists to be sure that the folks that are accountable for those systems have reviewed and signed off to be sure that the requirements have been met, and if not, why. Identifying where there's manual workarounds, reporting capabilities that didn't pan out, various areas where in any system implementation, inherently you're going to run into issues, right? And so having some tracking mechanisms to understand what some of those issues are, what's the rationale for continuing to go ahead, and what are we going to do in the future to not only implement the work at ground, but hopefully come to a better place in the next iteration. Number 5, institutionally and key accounting controls, looking, and this one specifically reconciliation, policy, approved templates, and executive oversight. Accounting reconciliations are a key control in any organization. And so and there's just, again, lots of complexity within SANDAG, so lots of accounting reconciliations. The more complex your organization is, the more complex your accounting can get. And so having a more, a reconciliation policy, including who's going to review it, who's accountable for accounting reconciliations, how frequently are they performed, how do we document those reconciliations so that somebody can come in afterwards and see that they occurred. Will definitely help out your external auditors to speed up that process as well if they can see very clearly that those things have happened. And then using a version control tracker for the reconciliations, requiring quarterly management review and reporting to executive management to prevent any unresolved variances to linger. And so hopefully, working on some of those key accounting reconciliation controls can provide more timely information about any potential unresolved variances or issues that we're still working out. The next priority action, increase centralization of invoice management and establish some risk-based approval. Lots and lots and lots of invoices always going through SANDAG. And so having a centralized invoice receipt within, currently it's not, centralized invoice receipt is currently not happening within the ERP. It's very much up to a lot of the project management to be sure that all of those invoices are reviewed and approved. And so having a centralized point of receipt helps to keep an eye on the various invoices and expenses that are coming through the organization to be sure that we pay them timely, we pay them according to expectations, we have consistency in that review process. Knowing that we can't look and scrutinize every single invoice the same way, adding some risk or dollar tiered approvals, a risk-based system to really analyze how far do we really need to vet and how many approvals do we need? Do we need 2 approvals? Do we need 5 approvals? Dependent on kind of just the risk profile of that invoice. And so there's been some discussion about how we can establish some centralization of that process. All right, 4 more priority actions here. The 7th one, establishing centralized billing oversight across all your various funding sources. Really, this is involving deploying a single management reviewed mechanism to consolidate cumulative billings. And that's your local, state, federal, transnet, the various funding sources that SANDAG receives to provide some real-time visibility into billing progress, key financial metrics, and compliance deadlines. Making sure that, if what is our funding levels? Are we using that funding? If not, what's going on with those projects or whatever that funding is associated with? But having a mechanism to really consolidate and understand where we are at any given point in our billings across all our various funding sources. The 8th priority action, stabilizing toll revenue counting and reporting. We know that we're going through the process of transitioning to a new back office system. In the interim, we've had a lot of manual workarounds between the FastLane and ERP. Those systems were not able to really be fully integrated. And so there's lots of manual workarounds that are occurring, and the accounting team has gone to great lengths to be sure that significant control is put in place. Reconciliations are performed. However, we really have a single point of reliance right now going on in that function. Really, one person that really understands all the various moving parts around that and trying to get around those manual workarounds And then making sure that we have documented reconciliation, secondary review, and then a path to better integration of the systems once they are in place to improve accuracy and resilience. The ninth priority action, clarify budget ownership, enforce continuous budget to actual monitoring. Publishing agency-wide budget process, and this is where those responsibilities really weigh in, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. We did note that because everybody in SANDAG has some responsibility for budget management, understanding what everybody should be doing, how we are coordinating those activities, who's going to be reviewing the budget to actual, and actually having requiring a monthly to quarterly budget to actual reporting for all projects with variance explanations. I think not only would that help management understand the effectiveness and efficiency of that project management, but also give more visibility to the board and stakeholders in terms of where we are on a project basis and any corrective actions that may be needed. And then the last one, increasing grant reimbursement expectations. Lots of grants too that we're relying on at SANDAG, payment controls and visibility. We do know that there are generally, just from federal statutes, 30-day payment expectations. And so tracking receipt dates, status, and delay reasons across grants and reporting compliance to leadership to reduce any potential non-compliance and risk, and as well as strain on your subrecipients, right? And so definitely has some opportunity to improve in that space as well. And then finally, in this area, why don't you be responsible? We did provide a recommended roadmap for all 10 of these priority actions. You'll see that a lot of them can be performed together. There's not a stopping an endpoint on one before you can really pick up and work on another. The beginning ones, 0 to 6 months, we thought that setting up that internal control framework to really take a step back with management, make sure that we all agree on what are those key controls that we're going to rely on to mitigate risk and to ensure that we have effective and efficient processes and reporting and compliance. 0 to 6 months, and then at the same time, institutionally those reconciliation and the accounting function that we're talking about, and increasing some of the centralization of invoice management. Those are kind of the 0 to 6 months things that we thought may be able to be at least started and somewhat getting down the road on those. 6 to 12 months moving forward, centralizing that IT governance may take any centralization, those types of things can sometimes take a little bit longer. With IT governance, setting up that CIO equivalent and finding the right competencies and the people that can really do that work may take a little bit longer. Centralizing billing oversight and stabilizing that whole revenue accounting, especially in the midst of an implementation of a back office tolling system, may take a little bit longer. That budget management enforcement, grant reimbursement expectations, starting to move into that 3-month time frame once we've started that internal control framework process. That really helps to inform our budget management and grant reimbursement expectations, as well as billing oversight, moving into that 6 to 12 months. And then you'll see that over the long term, and this is probably past 18 months, continuing to set management qualifications and specialized training. That's an ongoing process because our environment is always evolving, as well as the system implementation quality gates. So required steps for technology change management. With every different technology that is presented to us, there may be different things that we need to consider. And so that's always a continuous thing that we're looking at. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly touch on the summary of observations and recommendations in each of these areas. Again, I know you guys have the report and you've probably looked at a lot of this already, but we want to be sure we give you some time at the end here. And so I'll go over the first two. Rima's going to hit the last two that are related to IT and technology. Remember, we have those 4 areas in which 18 of these 18 observations live. The first one being accounting and finance. And so at the beginning, we have the system limitation, manual workarounds, and reliance on individuals that we talked about, specifically with the toll system. We know that continues to be something that is a priority for management and for SANDAG. And so making sure that we have that necessary integration, or if not, that path to integration requiring manual reconciliations that are, it says inconsistently performed, but that's because there's just so much there that needs to be evaluated on the reporting, especially from Fastlane. And so making sure, trying to implement a more consistent reconciliation process, although those manual reconciliations are currently happening. Much dependent on one staff member. Right now, I know that there's a transition to try to move a lot of that back to staff level accounting. Right now, it had to live within one person who has, the a CPA credential, but moving that into having more people that have that an understanding of that process would be helpful here. It's also not supported by formal directives, and so that also increases that single point of reliance. And so having better directives in this area. The second one, capital asset recording and oversight. We saw that there was quite a bit of opportunity here to have some better asset tracking processes. Right now, it's pretty reactive and reliant on project management to self-report changes. Or if there's an automated notification that a staff member has left, we may get an indication of some transactions that we need to evaluate that impact asset values. But right now it's very self-reported and self-driven, leading to asset capitalization and tracking really happening all at once, really mostly one time of year. And so given that capital assets are so critical in our balance sheet, definitely an opportunity to improve there. Also, asset transaction information is currently, a lot of it is currently stored in a separate location, which again adds to some of the inefficiency and increases the risk of incomplete or inaccurate asset records. The third one here, training practices and professional credentialing. Training, certification, and some professional development tracking is informal. It's decentralized. We don't have tracking mechanisms in place for that. We rely on individual self-reporting and some ad hoc manager oversight rather than a structured process, and really an intentional look at the various things that we need to be planning for in terms of development of our teams. There's also a limited emphasis on professional credentials. We have a low credential rate, lots of really good experience. We do know that credentials help to build and continue to build those qualifications, hinders efforts to build and maintain strong technical capabilities in accounting and finance. Fourth one, in invoice management procedures. As we mentioned, decentralized PM-driven invoice processing, no risk-based approval framework. Again, having a more centralized oversight of those invoice management procedures as we discussed. We talked about accounting reconciliation consistency and timeliness. Right now, reconciliation practices are a bit inconsistent, lacking some formal documentation review, evidence that those things have occurred, delays interim reporting, but also create some challenges when the external auditor comes in. And then billing oversight and funding sources. Cumulative billings tracked at that individual spreadsheet level, no real centralized monitoring of the billing of those funding sources. And so adding some centralized monitoring there would be very helpful. Observations in this area, we've already talked about quite a few of them. Okay. All right, back to that internal control framework. Yes. Establishing, again, an overarching recommendation that's really going to drive improvement in all the various areas that we're talking about today. Professional credentialing, training, invoice management, strengthening those policies and oversight for reconciliation, billing oversight, enhancing our toll operations, accounting procedures, again, looking at that integration, and then capital asset management improvements. Continuing to work on how the capital asset module within Tyler Content Manager can be adopted to centralize that capital asset management function. The next one, budgets and grants, financial planning observations and recommendations. We didn't dive as much of this into the priority actions, but I'll talk a little bit about it here. The first one being timeliness of grant reimbursements. Mentioned that's kind of the CFR 200-305 is really what we're basing that criteria on, making sure that subrecipients have those funds to reduce any strain on them. Grant-specific invoice review, right now, there's a standardized invoice checklist that doesn't address some of the program-specific requirements, making some potential for an inconsistent review and missed ineligible costs within our grants, which we definitely don't want to go out the door. The next three are regarding budget monitoring and ownership and training. Right now, there's really not a consistent process for that budget to actual monitoring that we were really looking for. Limited reporting for management to oversee that process and ensure accountability, and reducing visibility into project performance. Part of that is due to the ownership, potentially. Roles for updating budget especially between the draft and final stages, are a little bit unclear. What's the role? What am I to do in the interim? What am I looking at a monthly basis? How do I actually push up some of what is going on in terms of the project level budget? And then budget training and skills development. It's not just about looking at two numbers and comparing and getting a variance. Having some key training in budget management it's related to project management very much so, especially at SANDAG. And so right now, some limited training and emphasis on budgeting, specifically on how it works in SANDAG. So improving some of that would be helpful to ensure that we have some better ownership and budget monitoring and just consistent budget processes across SANDAG. We've already talked about a lot of these when it comes to the recommendation side, but again, clarifying those roles and expectations for budget management and training, improving and making sure that our grant reimbursement timeliness is clear, the expectation is clear, and we are monitoring compliance with that. Invoicing, our invoice review for grants, developing very specific invoice checklists when it comes to the various grant requirements. Of course, some grants have a little bit more inherent risk associated with them than others. And so having a little bit more variability into that would be helpful for ensuring that we maintain compliance with our invoices. Formalizing the budget monitoring requirements and improving budget reporting tools. This is really interesting, conducting a user needs assessment to prioritize the report development within the ERP so we can have some more standardized budget to actual reporting versus having to do that ad hoc and outside of the system, seeing how we can use our ERP to better deploy those tools. And then implementing a mid-cycle budget review, mandatory mid-cycle review for all projects. Again, we're going to have a conversation and accountability as to why we're not hitting budgets over or under, and then who's responsible for working on any remediation activities. So I'll turn it over to Rima. She's going to go over some of the more technology-focused results and recommendations.
So for the area of where we looked at the actual system implementation, what we identified that there was not strong governance in terms of how is this overall project going to be executed. And we saw that there was not a unified plan in terms of how to execute it, as well as some turnover that impacted the actual consistency throughout the implementation to assist and ensure that the system was going to go live and be utilized and configured for how the SANDAG needed it to be utilized and implemented. And so based off of kind of just an overarching weaker governance that also impacted the actual more specific project oversight and execution of what that needed to exist and how we want to make sure what we thought we wanted at the beginning to what we are seeing in the system to then when we go live that they all align. And so because of those challenges, there was some limited effective implementation and utilization once the system went live to be able to go, this is what I thought I wanted, this is what I'm actually seeing, how do they actually correlate? Just because when people are starting to actually use a brand new system, having utilized existing tools, existing processes, that people change management that Holly was alluding to is really a significant component of any system implementation as well. And then be able to understand that what are those risks, what are the requirements that we're looking for when we're going live with the system. All of those things converge together to create some challenges on the ERP side. And so if we go to the next slide, we talk about some of the observations and recommendations from those observations. And so it's really being able to, along with having a strong internal controls framework, overarching, it's really also focusing on IT governance. IT is so pervasive in any organization with all of the system implementations, all the tools that everybody's using from a technology perspective, making sure that it's not just on what is the overall entity going to do, but how do we have strong IT governance so that as different departments and functions are coming to IT, we have the ability to ensure we're prioritizing the right actions, we're utilizing the right technology to be able to have efficient and effective operations throughout the organization. And then to be able to ensure that there is that clarity of roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes when you have a large system implementations, major module updates, it's not just one team that's going to be utilizing that system and that data. It's going to be multiple functions that are going to need it. So ensuring that we're talking as a whole organization about what an implementation may look like, what may be a new module, to ensure that it's not assumed who's going to have the responsibility of doing testing, who's going to have the responsibility for helping to assist and define those requirements, but to be more broader in scope as well as understanding that even though it may be a technology implementation, IT can help support that process, but it needs to be a collaborative process throughout the organization of having all parties and all stakeholders at the table to ensure that the system is being developed not to what IT's expectations are, but what the actual different departments and functions need as well, so that it's being implemented to be purpose-driven, not just having the existence of a technology that we anticipate will accomplish the goals. And some of the other kind of commentary that we have in here is about when you have that IT governance, you're creating some templates. So not every system implementation is going to be the same, but starting to create, here are the milestones, here's the standard expectations that we have. How do we tweak it for every single type of implementation or tool that we're going to be implementing? So a lot of you probably have on your radar artificial intelligence. What does that mean? So that's not necessarily a system implementation because there's a lot of that back-end technology that exists, but how does the organization start to think about and look at that? So in that same way that we're talking about a system implementation, really thinking about what are the expectations and goals that we're looking for out of any technology to be able to get those processes in place and implemented appropriately, ensuring that we have testing that's performed, ensuring that there is training that's occurring so that when people are starting to utilize any of the newer technology that's being implemented within the organization, everybody has the understanding of what it was built for and how it can be used. And if those don't align, then where do we need to have that education about what the intention of the process is, where it's redefining what the expectation of the manual process is, what are the outside controls versus what's actually being implemented and what the system is capable of doing. As well as validating that when you have a system that goes live, doing that testing to understand what those requirements are, to be able to have an alignment of, here's what I thought at the beginning, here's what I'm seeing in the system, this is actually what I'm looking for, I am comfortable with what the system is going to be doing, I understand what my role and components are going to be outside of the system, so that when you go live and you have those discussions about what that exit criteria is and expectations, everybody's on board. That post go live, you will have those strong processes in place and understood about how we're going to implement the system as well. And then really thinking about not the system won't do absolutely everything for you. So what are those risks that you may have of, if we understand that there's some technical limitations of the technology or the functionality today, what are the manual processes? Are we comfortable with that? Is that a deal breaker? Is that something that is critical that we want to go back to the vendor for? Do we need to implement additional tools? So kind of understanding what that overall framework looks like as well is some of the recommendations that we have based off of kind of our assessment of the overall implementation. If we go to the next slide, this is kind of a little bit more succinct. So we looked at the implementation and we're really focused on kind of where does the system exist today. And so we talk about what IT general controls are, and they're really considered kind of pervasive, foundational. How do we ensure that the right people have the right access, that the right changes are happening? And for some of those things, we didn't necessarily identify that those were strong and in place. And so something that we typically look for, which is not an easy task to do, is let's go back, take a look at who has access. Are the right people have the right access as of today? And so some of those things that we would look to have in place aren't in place today. And so looking forward to having those IT general controls implemented within the organization, so we feel comfortable about the utilization of the system, the people having access, and then how that system is being used. And if there are changes that need to occur, that it's following a structured process through the implementation of IT governance, as well as ensuring that any changes that are occurring, that there is that in-depth testing that is occurring to ensure that if a change is being implemented into the production environment, that all the parties and the primary people that will be using that functionality can have the agreement that this is intended functionality updates are what we were looking for. And then we also had identified that just some of the expectations of what the organization was looking for to be implemented was not necessarily specifically outlined. And so as the organization went live with the system, what ended up being as available functionality was not what was intended. And so there were just some challenges in being able to utilize the software as initially thought. And so our recommendations including kind of making sure that as you go live with other systems or have other testing, that from the requirements process all the way through to prior to approving a change into the production environment, having those requirements tested, validated, and aligned and ensured that any testing is done aligns to the expectations of the requirements, as well as ensuring that when you do testing, who will be doing testing, who will be the approval, so that there is cohesiveness and understanding of what those responsibilities are, as well as really looking at what IT general control processes need to be more formally established with documentation to be able to support that general controls and the support of the different systems within the organization. And then really looking at ensuring understanding when you do have changes, even in any more significant modules that get implemented, that there is documentation around kind of the go live readiness. And if there are workarounds that exist, that everybody agrees with it before implementing a change into the production environment.
Well, thank you, Rima and Holly, for covering those detailed results. We're now going to open to any questions from the audit committee.
I want to thank the Weaver team. It is a very comprehensive report, assessment, a lot of details, a lot of material, and we thank you for that. We can go to member comments, but if we hold member comments till after the management response, so we can have public comments. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, then we'll go ahead and go to second part is management response. Maria?
Okay. And I'll let the team go into the detail of the management response. So I hope you indulge me a little bit in zooming out a little bit. Today I'm super happy today on today's presentation, because it's definitely one of those moments that those crossroads that we're having. I always have told through the years my team, follow the finances, inputs, outputs, follow the money, I tell them. In this case, the financial assessment that was just presented shows a broader scope in great detail. But we also have to, and it was mentioned, the complexity of this agency. The budget, our budget is above $1 billion in a year. In the last 4 or 5 years, just on grants, we have acquired about $1.2 to $1.3 billion in grants. The finance audit didn't follow, even if it's within finance right now, the exercises that we go under finance in the connections with all the different departments and pursuing those grants, which is a gigantic task. But if we really reflect into what is SANDAG, and thinking if it was a private or quasi-governmental agency, it's a conglomerate of multiple activities or businesses. You have a toll agency that has its own needs, technical requirements, accounting requirements, HR requirements, legal requirements, on and on. You have a planning agency. SCAC itself, the largest MPO in the nation, just focuses on planning. And we have that planning department here also, that we're the MPO of the region. But the Consolidation Act also has us as a delivery agency. So we're kind of also a engineering and contracting firm, which, the planning department has their accounting needs, legal needs, HR needs, ITS needs, all those things. as well as our delivery machine, our capital team, which focuses on professional services from architecture, engineering, but then focuses also dealing with contractors. DBE, we just had a very robust conversation on the ongoing roller coaster of the different requirements federal and state government has. Out of those 1.3 grants, $1 billion of grants in the last 4 or 5 years, about 900 million of those were state and about 250, 300 were federal, and it pivots as the different funding sources. So what I'm trying to say is, at the same time as we have a planning agency, a tolling agency, a capital delivery agency, a criminal justice data agency, a PR and communications agency that's trying to manage. We're not the UN, even so some people say that we are in the public comment realm, but I would call us a UCC, the United Cities and Counties of San Diego, where also our comms and GR team works on having that relationship with all the elected officials of all the cities, the county. And within, we also have a Department of Foreign Relations, right? Which we deal with our neighbors. Let it be Mexico. Let it be, this is the county where we have the most tribal governments in the nation. Just yesterday, our chairwoman, our vice chair were in a meeting with tribal leadership. The complexity of this agency requires a lot of the items that were discussed, but no single formula and process will be the same for each of these businesses that I just mentioned or endeavors. And sometimes we try to put everything in the box, and we have to, but we also have to carve in the box sections for each of those multiple responsibilities. So zooming back in the last 18 months, we had come in, all of us, the board, the audit committee, all the different PACs, OIPA, and we've worked on stabilizing. We work on pivoting this agency to be a board-driven organization. We have worked on multiple assessments. Like, this is such an incredible one, and I appreciate it, together with all the different audits. We have a cascade of recommendations from OIPA, from ITOG, from triennial audits, from other federal audits, and we're bringing all of them together. And this assessment helps us bring it together. We have created an organizational structure in the management level, a senior organizational structure that will help us, follow the board guidelines in an independent way of those that shore up that not just the CEO can decide what can be done. And we are focusing in this reassessment and accountability, and really looking at those core competencies that each of those businesses and specialized members of those businesses or activities or responsibilities have to focus. We are working, and we have been working with independent arms like OIPA and now legal, which wasn't an independent arm, another of those wins in the last 18 months. And we're working on creating those fundamental structures. Even today, we have discussed also on high-level items, but very detailed items. You really need to work on the foundations of a building before you start building on the second floor or on the roof. You need to first work on the first building and on, like Chair Hiebner mentioned, the framing of the agency. And we need to keep reassessment each department and looking into those connections and bringing all this together. So that's why I'm so excited, because this first assessment is taking us there. As I mentioned on my opening comments, we have also taken internally within the management team an assessment of our toll ops operations. We're going to be putting out a request for proposal for an assessment for an HR department assessment, and it's probably going to be shore up, because I know on the work plan OIPA will have an audit on an HR department, so it's going to really shore up. So it's really exciting of carrying that. But I don't want to lose focus that our biggest asset is our personnel, and our personnel are also delivering that budget magnitude and those grants that I mentioned. So it's an ongoing process. So I truly appreciate it. I'll let Shanae go into the details. I think there's a lot. I appreciate the roadmap for success. It's really helpful. But it is a pivoting point, but I had to make that assessment of the complexity of the agency and the achievements that this committee has achieved, right? Has helped stabilize, has helped focus this organization into a board-driven organization, has continuous brought up and reminded us of those assessments. It has really helped us in the organizational structure, and it's really helping us move forward. So Shanae, do you want to go in detail on response? Thank you.
All right. I am Shanae Pickney-Forrest, Director of Internal Controls. With me, I have our team, Kimberly Trammell, Director of Accounting and Finance, Susan Huntington, Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants. I have with me Grace Mino, Senior Director of Data Science and BITS, Don Vitisse, the Chief Financial Officer, and we also have Josh Golter, the Director of Human Services. So we're here to provide our management response. We first want to recognize and acknowledge that we agree with the recommendations. The assessment identified 7 key areas where strengthened internal controls can help us improve and elevate SANDAG's accounting, finance, and budgeting functions. We'll discuss how some of these core themes in the report relate to some of our existing efforts. The report also provided confirmation that we are on track, the correct track, with the areas that we prioritized and presented to you months earlier, related to policies and procedures, documentation, training, and change management. The report also provided us with insight regarding the need for specific improvements within our budgeting, accounting, and IT departments. After I provide that overview, the rest of the team will provide summaries of the specific next steps in their respective areas. So as you see on this slide, the report summarized 7 core themes. We wanted to highlight that 3 of those themes we have as our internal focus as we continue to focus on the basics and bolstering our foundational practices. So for example, with policies and procedures, we are actually in the process of finalizing our policy guidance framework, which would include standardizing the content for inclusion in our guidance. So for example, that would be the specific information and policies and procedures where we're identifying specific roles and responsibilities. We're adding information into the policies in regards to the specific internal controls that those policies are addressing. We're also continuing to draft, identify, and/or revise policies that were specified in other audits. Particularly, a lot of our focus at the moment has been on those audit recommendations with improvements, with recommendations to improve our procurement policies and procedures. And then with this Weaver report, it provided us with a comprehensive list of policies and procedures for us to focus on. And the good thing is it told us the specific gaps in those policies that were missing. So when we focus on the policies and procedure improvements there, we know exactly what to look for. With training and workforce development, internally, we have identified an initial training plan that's identifying mandatory trainings that are required by law. We are identifying required trainings, and these are trainings that we have identified as necessary for staff to conduct their regular job responsibilities. But in that training plan, we had also identified needs that were apparent through other audits and internal discussions, and we have assigned hours for those. In particular, we have assigned hours for finance and finance, accounting, and budgeting training. And with this Weaver report, we can take that opportunity to take the Weaver report and tailor those trainings accordingly. For change management, we're also in constant communications with our data and bits team in regards to how we can make our draft change management protocols, which are in progress, how we can make sure that as we're drafting them, they're in alignment with best practices. The Weaver assessment also recommended that the Director of Internal Controls develop a comprehensive internal control framework that captures accounting, budgeting, and information technology risk and controls. The framework, these frameworks would provide structure for how SANDAG manages risk. It would allow us to continuously monitor our operations. And those frameworks would actually also serve as succession planning tools as to how the organization operates and conducts its business. That would be documented, accessible, and easy to follow for any new employees who are coming in. I do want to note that I had already began developing frameworks for some of our other practices related to policies and procedures, training, and inventory management. And in those frameworks, we are identifying the risk, the controls, identifying whether or not we have those controls in place. If they're not in place, we're trying to make sure that we are implementing those. And the other thing that I do want to note is that I'm taking this opportunity with those that I have already begun developing these frameworks with to train the staff to help them understand what we're doing, why this is important, the importance of the internal controls, and having them kind of develop this with me so that I have the perspective from the line staff level all the way up through management. I will continue to develop these frameworks within the next 6 months, and then we can make a decision as to whether or not, we would need external assistance to kind of go into a deeper dive for some of the accounting and budgeting frameworks. And now I will turn it over to Kim to discuss our next steps related to accounting and finance recommendations.
Good morning, Kimberly Trammell, the Director of Accounting and Finance. So I will give you a high-level overview of our response and planned actions in relation to the recommendations. I'm happy to say that many of these are things we've already been working on or are aware of and had in our future plans. So the first area, of course, is our vendor invoice processing. And I have to mention that this process changed dramatically with the implementation of the ERP system. So as we've been working on invoice processing in ERP, we've learned a lot, and so that's why many of these areas we had already identified some changes were needed. We actually have already been working on 3 out of 5 of the areas related to vendor processing. So one is implementing our vendor module in the ERP system. That's part of phase 3, which is one of the last pieces of the ERP implementation. And we are about ready to go live with a pilot of that with just a couple of our vendors, and then plan by the end of the fiscal year to have it available to all of our vendors. Another one that was mentioned was the risk-based threshold for approvals on our invoice processing. SANDAG is a complex organization, as many people have mentioned so far, and so there's no one-size-fits-all for our invoice approvals. So that's why we really have been working on what are the needs for a construction invoice versus a grant invoice versus a planning invoice or just a daily utility invoice. So while we figure out and better define what that risk-based threshold is, we're going forward with an interim dollar-based threshold for approvals to make that change. And so that should be happening within the next couple of months. Contracts and accounting have both been aware of the need to address timeframes for invoices, and when we dispute an invoice, there can be a lot of back and forth, and that can take a little bit of time, and so the documentation of that process. So we have already incorporated tracking some of those dates and those timeframes in forms that we have available and in other processes that we've been working on improvements. But we are going to move forward with some of the recommendations included here, including updating our policies and procedures to include those timeframes, and emphasizing in our training and our materials and our policies and procedures that the invoice received date can be put into our ERP system with the invoice, and the due date can be put into, or should be put into, the system with the invoice. The last item in the vendor invoice processing section is around the centralized receipt of invoices. What we're looking to do is have a centralized receipt of invoices within each department and put in mechanisms for monitoring whether those have been processed and put into the system. Once they're in ERP, we have tracking reports that we can pull, but part of the recommendation around this is really what's happening with the invoice from the point of receipt to getting into our ERP system. Going into the second area, which is reconciliations, Holly explained this well. We have quite a few. Again, complex organization. We have over 50 reconciliations already identified on our reconciliation tracking schedule. So our action is to institutionalize that tracking schedule so it is used more frequently, and it is part of our policies and procedures. We will go through and review, do we have everything on there already? Are there other reconciliations we need to add? One area I've identified is with bringing payroll in-house. That adds a couple more reconciliations that were not on the sheet that we've been using. We have had, as Mario mentioned, we've been stabilizing and building fundamentals. And so in that and some of the other priority projects that are going on, some of those reconciliations have not been done as timely as they need to be. So that's something we're working on, recording the dates of when they are done, building capacity to make sure that they are done, so that they don't wait till year end, which is what has happened with some of them. And a final thing that we identified coming out of this process is that we really need to be as clear as we can when we're providing quarterly reports to the board and the public about what the numbers represent and their purpose. So we've identified some additional footnotes and explanations that we think will help. On the last kind of area I termed systems and manual processes. The financial side of the ERP system has been live for less than 2 years. With that, you're going through and you're reviewing all of your processes, you're updating all of your SOPs. And as you go through, as you learn things, you're looking for ways to automate and to remove some of those manual processes. With the toll revenue accounting, that's been something we haven't been able to remove all of the manual because of the issues that we've had with the fast lane system in the past. And so we really have had a manager come in and be very hands-on to how to develop a process that works with the system limitations that we've identified and we know about, and puts in a process that mitigates some of the risk and gets us good financial reporting so that we can improve on the modified opinion that we've had from our auditors. So we brought in somebody, they've been very hands-on with that process to design it essentially. And so as Holly mentioned, now we are moving forward with institutionalizing that process, documenting it in policies and procedures, and making sure that we have staff accountants who are also CPA qualified to provide that, to do that work, and then it is reviewed by the manager. So this is an area that we have been working on, and will develop the policies and procedures that really support that area. And as I said, we continue to look for ways to automate, to reduce the manual time that our staff is spending so that they can really focus that time on the analyticals and making sure that we are in good financial shape and understand our financial environment. And with that, I will turn it over to Susan Huntington to discuss the budget side.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimberly. So good morning. My name is Susan Huntington. I'm SANDAG's Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants. Similar to Kimberly, many of the recommendations coming out of this assessment align with work that is already going on in my department. So I really appreciate the work that the team has done here and the opportunity to speak about the Weaver assessment. So we really have two priority areas where our actions are occurring. This is on the grant compliance side and on the budget monitoring. On the grant compliance side, we're focused on ensuring transparency and timeliness of reimbursements to our vendors. First, we're addressing the prompt payment requirements under CFR 200-305, which Holly talked about. This indicates that the recipient of federal funding, SANDAG in this case, must make payment to a subrecipient, that would be one of our grantees, within 30 calendar days after a payment request. Unless the entity, SANDAG, reasonably believes the request to be improper. So the assessment noted that the invoice receive dates are not consistently tracked in the ERP, and that project managers are tracking differently what they think is the received date. So there's been some confusion about which date should be captured. Should it be the day that we initially receive the invoice, or should that date be when we receive a complete and accurate invoice after resolving potential issues with the grantee? So to address this, we're evaluating updates to our contract language and training of our project managers to clearly define invoice requirements and the use of a standardized invoice form. So until now, we've strongly encouraged the use of a template from our grantees, but we have not required it. In the near term,
Can
yes.
there are several points that I wanted to engage, but this is so important one because it's not just about this. Actually, one thing that probably wasn't captured here because it's not part of finance is we actually also engage in a training program with the grant recipients to basically teach them how to fish. FAC is a good example. We have actually assigned a special person to work with them on working on their invoicing because there was kind of recurring that they weren't hitting the mark on the requirements. So in addition to what finance is doing, planning has gone and started initiating a training and shadow program with some of the grant recipients to just also work with them on trying to get it done by the first time, because then we start in the cycle. And then when did the clock start, right? Does it start when they resend the invoice? So sorry for the interruption, but I think that additional effort, it's not being captured, but that's just one example of many of additional peripheral activities to try to get us on the mark here.
Thanks, Mario. So in addition to that work effort that's going on, we will be establishing a centralized location for invoice logging, tracking, and issue documentation that all program managers will use, and we'll do training to our program managers because the tracking that they're doing separately is not consistent across the different grant programs. So that's something that we definitely know that we need to do. This will increase our transparency, accountability, and better support timely payments to our vendors. Based on this tracking log, we'll also begin regular reporting to senior leadership so that we can make sure that we're making improvements in our performance of timely payments. And this connects directly to our second priority action up here, which is developing invoice and reimbursement checklists tailored to each program. So the current agency-wide checklist does not capture those program-specific requirements that we must address when we're reviewing invoices based on federal, state, local, and program guidelines. So documenting the full review steps for each program will strengthen the accuracy, consistency, and the compliance. And the other set of priority actions within my group are related to the budget development, monitoring, and reporting. So the assessment notes that SANDAG does not yet have a single integrated budget development and monitoring system. So while implementing the ERP was an important step, our budget still spans several platforms. So we have PM tools that we use for capital budgets, for example, IMBM, which is an internal developed tool, which which we use for personnel resource allocation that goes into our budgets. And the ERP we use for non-capital budgets and actual expenditures. So to improve oversight, we are formalizing required monthly and quarterly budget to actual reviews for project managers, department directors, and senior management. We've also established a group of department analysts who serve as budget coordinators, and they provide support with annual development and ongoing monitoring. These staff are key collaborators with our project managers and department directors and my group in central budgets, and provide additional oversight and analysis into budget utilization. As part of documenting processes and procedures in the handbook, which is currently under development, a RACI matrix will be implemented to clearly define roles for each step of budget development and monitoring processes. And in addition, we're working with our technology team to create automated reports that pull data from all these disparate systems to provide consistent real-time financial information. This will allow us to shift from a reactive analysis to more proactive financial management and strengthened financial decision-making. And I do want to note that the timing of this assessment is particularly helpful as the agency is currently developing the fiscal year 27 annual budget. So this work normally occurs from the November to May timeframe. And the findings and recommendations from this assessment will guide our work throughout this process and will inform our lessons learned for the upcoming year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Grace Mino to discuss technology implementation and change management.
Good morning, Audit Committee members, Chair, and everybody here today. I just want to say thank you to the Weaver team for conducting this assessment and just presenting gaps that need to be addressed overall, especially with the ERP implementation and some of our information technology processes. Just like Susan and Kim and Shanae have highlighted, a lot of the work has been already in process. We do just need to formalize our IT governance, our data governance. We want to ensure that we put the risk management in the process and also following the system development's life cycle, where we're making sure that we're planning and analyzing, designing, developing, testing, implementing, and maintenance, and then to make sure that we're following that iterative process, that we go back and make sure, as Rima and Holly have pointed out, did we do what we intended to do when we started this process? I deeply thank Rima for highlighting that turnover has impacted this, but it may have slowed down the process, but we, staff has been continuously working to ensure that any new system that comes in goes through a needs assessment and can be fully integrated with the ERP system. So again, just formalizing our processes, ensuring that we draft policies, we make sure implementation goes slow, it's thoughtful, it's being collaborative across all of our different departments, and then also ensuring that training and change management are communicated across management and staff and that everybody's comfortable with the changes. We purposely did not implement AI right now because we wanted to ensure that staff, management, and everybody else was comfortable, even though lots of agencies have already fully implemented it there. So just know that's just one example that I wanted to highlight. Also, we'll internally be doing a large workshop, which will be cross-functional and cross-collaborative. We're doing a deep dive on our ERP system and asking what's working, what's not working, and what was the intentions when we brought this system on, and how has that changed? Also, we're looking into either doing two things. We're conducting the assessment right now after we've received the Weaver assessment, which is, do we hire an ERP systems administrator specifically for ERP, or do we want to do a competitive process where we can have a consultant come in and tell us where we can make areas of opportunity or where we have not been fully utilizing ERP to its best of its abilities. And lastly, I just want to point out that we've been working with our peer MPOs like MTC and also Arizona, Maricopa County, and we've been talking to them also about how their ERP planning and implementation has been going as well. And so I will turn this back to Dawn.
Yes, and Dawn Batiste, CFO at SANDAG, and really I have the very easiest part here just to kind of wrap things up, right? As you've heard from the team today, there's a significant amount of work that's been going on to reduce risk for the agency. And as Mario mentioned, the assessment does really help us prioritize and gives us a roadmap moving forward to address all of these risks. But I really want to take a minute to thank the Independent Audit Office and the Weaver team for their work on the report. And I want to really, again, as Courtney mentioned, thank all the staff who participated in interviews, providing documentation, and as always, continuing all of their regular daily work. So with that, that concludes our management response, and we're prepared to take any questions.
Can I add, Chair, just a couple more in the weeds examples that weren't mentioned, right? As we talked, I talked about all the different enterprises that SANDAG tries to achieve. If you really, from a finance perspective, our three main funding sources, well, not funding sources, our three main accounts, let's call it like that, is the OWB, the planning process, the CIP, the capital, and then our toll ops. Those are our three financial pillars. We're working on all of them on getting actuals and actuals revenue, actuals expenditures as they relate to the budgets. We will be having, each department is going to be having a health assessment, financial health assessment in the very near future quarterly, where we're going to evaluate it, and I'll be evaluating agency-wide. I'm already doing it monthly. But even getting the actuals has been a task of itself. So that's where I appreciate this assessment. We are creating, they were talking about centralizing where bills come in. Well, due to the different funding sources, it may be easy from an accounting perspective once you put it in, but you still need to put an in-between step. And I'll let you know, like on the capital, which is our almost 50% of our budget, our capital, our CIP, we're actually creating what's called a CPU contracts unit that's going to be tracking contracts and invoicing and burn rates and assessments on that. We're clearly defining, not everybody's a project manager. And here we talk loosely about project management, need to do this, need to do that. No, a project manager has a specific role and responsibility. And within a project, there's also a contract manager, a task order manager. That hasn't been defined in this agency. So we're working in those aspects. Training, it was heavily mentioned about the financial training, but like I said, 50% of our budget is the CIP, the capital. We're also working, Shanae, on a project management academy, right? And we have mentioned this before. So there's many things going on that we have brought up thanks to all those detailed recommendations that have come out in the audits. And now what this is, and this is why I opened it up, that I'm so happy in it, that's crossroad, because this brings it all together. This is bringing it together. It's a complex conversation, very complex conversation. That we're not going to solve it in this meeting. And like I mentioned before to the board and to you, the audit committee, this is going to be a journey that's going to take us some very long time to get it there. But we're getting there. We're getting there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for everybody and their participation and for being prepared for this meeting. I know there's a lot to do in the day-to-day operations, but to be here and be prepared and it is fantastic. Do we have any public comment, Jessica?
Thank you, Chair. We do. First will be Cesar Javier.
Thank you, SANDAG. Thank you, Uncle Sam. Thank you for the confession from our presenters. We have a reason to believe that this is the pinnacle of learning. And I miss our representation from the city of San Diego. Anyway, we are brave to say that we are accountable not to share this to our community. There was an accounting in our traditional family accounting, we have just two poles, the in and the out. Mommy, this is our spending. Where did you put the others? I think you lost in the casino. You tell me the truth. I'm sorry. We're speaking of the backdrop of our core city. We do not know where the money is being used. And we do not know where the money is supposed to go. Is it in one pole? That's our issue. And you know what's going on, our core city. I am not trying to single out our city. This is what we see. And this is our confession to you. Look at our property tax. Suddenly increased to 535. What happens to our community workers, hardworking, Vietnamese, Filipinos, Asians, immigrants hoping for that American dream? No, sir, no, ma'am. And I must tell you, we are learning a lot from here, and we hope to help our elected officials. They are not doing their homework. There are so many polls where the money goes. Not goes, but goes. Sorry.
Thank you. Your time has expired. And that concludes the public comments.
Thank you. I'm sure there's some committee comments. Maybe. Vice Chair.
Can I? Yes. If I may begin. Wow, this is very eye-opening, and I completely appreciate every single thing I have heard today, both from the our OIPA team and our auditors, as well as management. And I love, really, I'm so appreciative of this entire experience, and it's been several hours. And I told my folks, oh, I should be back by 11. No, this is absolutely just a fantastic experience, I think. And just as our CEO has mentioned, and I'm so super appreciative of just the entire direction that we are going in. This is a journey, and as we are at a crossroads, as it has been defined, this is, I feel very confident in the direction that we are going in, because to me, I can see clarity. Whereas before, really, SANDAG, what even is SANDAG? You know, how do you put it into one sentence? And then how do you explain that to somebody who isn't, you know, necessarily working at SANDAG, a part of the board, or even a regular attendee who is, you know, who is somebody that comes and pays attention and provides public comment? I have 1,000 questions, but I'm not going to detail everything. I mean, I took all of these notes. In general, if I can ask just a few of the technical questions, just to edify some of that foundation that I have come to understand just as of, you know, 2 hours ago. First of all, I am very interested in, and I know I've heard this already, but if you can please indulge me and explain it to me for the 4th time, a bit of a, you know, 30,000 level foot, 30,000 level view of the ERP system, the phases. I heard, you know, we're entering into phase 2. What does that mean? Is there 10 phases, you know, that we're into? I heard our financial piece of the ERP system is approaching 2 years, as far as, you know, beginning and implementing it all. I want to understand, is the ERP system this one huge brain that, you know, the audit is identifying as far as the centralized piece that is going to manage all of these different things? Just as Mario said, SANDAG is a conglomeration of all of these different agencies. Is this said ERP system the one brain that is uniting all of these agencies that are this conglomerate that is SANDAG, you know? I don't want to get too technical. I just want to, again, for the fourth time, please explain to me the status of the ERP system. Do we call it something else other than ERP? Go ahead.
Thank you. I love the description brain because in many ways an ERP system is intended to be an integration across multiple areas of the agency. So a brain is not a bad analogy. So the system was broken up into 3 phases. The first phase was the financials, which went live in January of 24. The second phase was payroll and HR, which went live in July of 25. So we just finished that implementation. And then the third phase was a number of small modules that are being implemented over time. You can almost think of them as like kind of adding on to an existing, something else we already did. So one of them was capital assets. There was some discussion of capital assets in this report. That one we actually finished about a year ago. So we're going into our second cycle with that piece of the program. And then we have a few that are still to come. One is the vendor module that I mentioned that will allow vendors to, through the web, look at their contracts and some of the information on what SANDAG is processing of their items. Another is something that's an employee portal that would allow the employees to go in and put in for like mileage reimbursements, that kind of thing. So these are small ones that are still being worked on as we move forward, but it's not a large set third level implementation compared to our first one, which was financials, and our second one, which was payroll and HR.
But if I can add, I think one thing that it's important that it took me a while to figure out, because everybody was talking ERP, and I go, oh my God, what is this? Is this the solution of all our issues, right? No. No, and we're gonna have to figure out, and that's why the communication, this is a finance discussion, so that it is so important because the finance actually it is being managed with the ERP, especially right now, the expenditures. But how you build the budget is still not connected. Let's even zoom out now to 100,000 feet. And it's a culture change in this agency because we bought a square box, but we like to do business in a rectangle way, and we put it in there, and there were voids, and it fitted and it didn't fit. So it's really adjusting the agency, the way the agency does business, to what the software can do. Extremely powerful software that we haven't even scratched on the surface. But I think one of the first big challenges was we wanted it to use it like we had used other things. And you can't buy a Ferrari and just use it on first gear. And that's it. But we're going to have, you're going to talk to us, you're going to see all the different, how it interconnects. But to build the budget, we're probably going to have several software. We're going to have a project management that goes resource loading. And then that resource loading program is going to have to connect to eventually whatever we're going to be using to do a budget. So it is very complex. I see it more right now. In the cusp is the expenditures, and we're trying to take it now to a broader level of all those potentials. But we will have to have other platforms to manage all the multiple functions that this agency does or activities that we do.
And right now on the screen, you can see this was an item that came to the audit committee on March 7th, 2005. So the slide deck is public. We can also resend the links to you all so you can have it for your documentation. And we're happy to come back again in March so that we could do a one-year update so you can know where we stand. And again, we probably should have done the deep dive by then and do more assessments internally. And we're happy to come back to the audit committee to give you all an update.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate seeing this again. And again, it's going to take me 4 or 5 times to truly have it in my head. Can you help me? Can you help me understand what isn't a part of the ERP system?
So one avenue that we had when we were doing the planning and implementation of ERP was to have our contracts management software in there. And we just realized, Kelly can attest to this, that contracts department did anything and everything they could to make it fit. And it was like, again, a square peg trying to be fit in a round hole, and it could not fit. So recently we've gone back to our contract management system that has a single source of truth. We're doing both in ERP and in the CMS system. So that's one area where we don't have something in the ERP. Another thing is we're trying to do the budgeting here. Again, like as Mario had mentioned, it might be a different approach given that we also need to do resource loading, project management, and also staff allocations. And so we're reassessing whether or not we can do a complete budgeting cycle in ERP. And if not, we either have to change the way we do our process or we have to find other workarounds, whether it be automating our processes in the back end or using another type of software. But we're trying to figure out how to make these integrations work so that it becomes a place where we have everything in one place.
Okay, but so understanding, we're trying to do that, but it is potential, ERP will have grand majority of things, but still there will be other things in a separate system, and that's okay.
And yes, 100%. There other systems may come online that we need, but we just plan for integration with ERP. And if not, then we will have to show the documentation, also the risk management. What are the pros and cons if it cannot fit in the ERP system? Why is it still living outside of the ERP system? So a decision document, and to ensure sign off from everybody in management and staff.
Yes, I really like the common theme that I heard from our auditors was this need to centralize everything, fully understanding that we're going to optimize that as much as possible, but it's not going to be, like Mario said, the one solution for everything. Because with the complexity of what this agency is, we have to be, realistic, right? And we have to try and optimize everything as we can to centralize things. But it is okay if there is, two sources, right?
Agree.
As far as, everybody's aware, everybody communicates, everybody understands where things are. So I'm not going to go into much more of my technical questions that I have on here. I just want to touch two more major themes. One was the idea of a CIO equivalent. So CIO being Chief Information Officer. So this is something that I heard today from this side, and then I heard something from this side, but I didn't quite understand what is management's what is management's plan or sort of how do you take that idea about us having a CIO? Because we don't have a CIO at SANDAG right now. Is that correct?
Well, actually, we just advertised, or we're going to put it out. Actually, we had Raj, who was our bids director, who came from Rivian, and he was so good that private industry took him back. So actually, the advertise, I think Grace is working on that advertise that should be going out pretty shortly. Right now, we have acting internal employees working on that, doing that function. But it is a very important function, and we're moving forward. We call it BIPS, and they report to Grace. And Grace is the senior director that deals with IT and with data. And hopefully that will go out by next week.
Yeah. So again, like what Mario said, our Director of Business Information and Technology Services, Rima, had pointed out that there was turnover in the position. So we will be posting that position this month. And then, as Mario had said, that there were being different assessments being done on several departments, like our toll ops and our HR. We are also planning to possibly do another assessment of our BITS department as well, when it comes to staffing, when it comes to vendor management, when it comes to infrastructure and cybersecurity. So just please know that that was in our plans as well.
Got it. So I understand there are folks that are doing these jobs.
Yes.
My question is SANDAG moving in the direction of having a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, or it is because it was brought up from the auditors and there is now, management has got to consider that, right? It's a recommendation. That's what I'm trying to get at is I would like to understand whether we should have a CIO. If the answer is no, that's okay. You know, there are identified other folks that obviously are doing the job. We have to have somebody that takes care of all of this work. I'm just interested in that idea. Should we have a CIO is all I'm getting at. And I don't need a response right now. I just think that is, you know, if we don't have a CIO, I think maybe we should, is all I'm saying.
I would say yes, and we're calling it a BIPS director. And it's not reporting directly to me, it's reporting to Grace.
Okay.
And it's a semantics.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, we retweak it and we pivot. But that's how we are structuring it right now. We saw that connection with also all the data that we need to develop for the regional plan and the different modeling tools that we're using and that have been consolidated. I can't have that many people reporting to me directly because it's just daunting. I had that same philosophical question within me. Should the chief information officer report to me or not? BITS director is acting in that level, but it's even a broader, more dealing with the data. And that's why you quasi have a chief information officer and data officer in Grace, and she would have the information portion reporting to her.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that explanation. And that goes to my final point. I mean, I have a bunch of highlights on here, but again, I'll be cognizant of time. My final point really is, again, back to fundamentals. And it has to do with the organization that is SANDAG, right? SANDAG, we are people, and it is people that make up SANDAG. And of course, it is, you know, all of the funding that comes into it, all of the product that we put out. So all of the projects, all of the roads, all of the everything. What I feel is fundamental is the people, and it's people working together and coming and understanding each other. And so something as basic as an organizational chart that has little squares, that has titles, that has a person's name on there, right? This is, of course, you know, I don't know how public all of this information needs to be, but at least internal to, you know, I think I heard Shanae say the line level people, you know, working up into the management level people and then working up into the executive level people. Something as simple as an org chart that clearly identifies who is who as far as a person to person is fundamental. And the reason I'm sounding perhaps a little bit frustrated is because in my city, in the city of National City, that piece of information took a while for me to see on paper. Perhaps it existed and it took a while to organize it in such a way that it could be sent to me in a document, but I was astounded. We finally do have something like that in the city of National City, so rest assured. What I'm trying to get at is, does that exist at SANDAG?
Everyone is smiling and looking at me right now. Yes, it does exist. We sent out a recent one about a week ago. Mario has a copy in front of him. I'd be happy to share that with the group. But yes, we do have an updated org chart that does reflect those reporting and organizational structures.
So here's where I want to dig in. Does every single person that works at SANDAG have access to this org chart?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
I send it to them directly, and it's also on our internal website and posted externally as well.
Thank you. So it's internal. My second question was, is there a version of this org chart that is accessible by the public?
I believe so. I need to go back and check. I'll make sure and I'll get that answer for you.
I would really appreciate if there is something on the website that says org chart that I can click on and boom, it just comes up and I can match, you know, little squares and go up the ladder, go down the ladder, this and that. That's my one, you know, fundamental thing. The other piece that I don't know if I'll be able to articulate it clearly, but I want a version of that in the what it looks like in the ERP system. So not with people's names, right? But how the ERP, the tree, really, the tree and the branches and how the little boxes connect in the ERP system, what goes where. again, I'm not going to be able to articulate it clearly, but what I want to get to is to be able to understand the ERP system as I am able to understand an org chart, for example. So that way it isn't a mystery. That way I can sort of, figure out, okay, this is the one place where I go to, to submit a, I don't know, reimbursement request, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or, if I need to do something else. If I'm looking at some type of, tree with branches, I can figure out the direction, you know what I mean? Or like little arrows here and there. And in a very high level type of way. And I think that is fundamental because then that gets us to understand what is SANDAG, how it functions. You know what I mean? Again, at a very, very glossed over level. That way it isn't a mystery. Finally, it is our responsibility to explain all of this in the most basic way to anybody in the public. If I go to my high school, as a speaker, and I'm trying to understand, or I'm trying to explain to a 12th grader what is SANDAG, and in the context of like a career fair or something, I feel it is my responsibility to be able to explain the highly complex agency that SANDAG is to a 12th grader and get them interested in the work that is done, in the potential, in what they can do here, for example. That's what I'm trying to get at is all of this complexity. I want to be able to explain it to somebody in very simple terms. So this comes down to like the training that you were talking about, the communication between each of us, understanding each other, the who's who, and and then distilling that in a one-page document. Just kidding. In a way that it isn't a mystery. It isn't a mystery. So often I come across somebody that has absolutely no clue what SANDAG is. And then I go into the terms that I have been taught and what, MPO, blah, blah, blah. And still that doesn't explain it. So that's all I'm saying. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for comments. Member Zito?
Thank you for your questions, Vice Chair, because my questions have been answered. So my questions were mainly on the ERP, what's not included, and that's been answered by the group.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the team, both teams actually. I'm trying to keep my head from exploding, so apologize in advance, but it's a lot of information. The first question I have is for the Weaver team. Thanks for all the great information. You did briefly touch on this concept of looking at staffing. I'm not quite sure. It didn't come out quite clear outside of some recommendations, but there's two ways to scope an organization. You can look at the number of people in the organization, and you can look at the budget, overall budget. And I'm just curious, when you looked at that, there's a lot of recommendations for additional roles or responsibilities, but I can't quite grasp, do you feel from your experience that the agency is staffed correctly in this particular area relative to that? Are these all new people that are going to come in that you're suggesting? Or do you think that, with what your analysis has been done, that we have the right number of people in this particular area for an agency of our quote unquote size? And we just need, you're saying there's different roles that could be adopted. I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah, that's a really great question. The assessment that we did of the structure of the finance and accounting department really focused on, are the right people in the right seats and have the right roles and responsibilities within their job description. Your question is more about, do we have the right number? And
are there enough people to do that?
Are there enough people
yes.
to do the job?
Yes.
And so what I can tell you is we didn't necessarily do a workforce like flow assessment in terms of like inputs, outputs, and how many cycle time and all that, which can get quite in the weeds. But what I can tell you is that from a root cause perspective, a lot of the results and the conditions that we found and dived further into at the end of the day came about from resource restraints and constraints. And so definitely there could be a more depth staffing analysis of, and I think first laying the foundation of your control framework, identifying roles and responsibilities and where those gaps are would probably be a very, like a good way to do that, to have some logic behind it and line of reasoning of the various aspects of that are going to be required. But again, from a root cause perspective, resource constraints and just, I mean, like you take your reconciliation process, like fundamental key accounting control, there's 50 of them, you know? And so it's not as if the accounting team doesn't see them and have them as important. It's just, we've got all of these things going on. And from a resource perspective, there's just, it's just the timing is too tight in some cases.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with kind of what Holly is stating and how our assessment really focused on. Again, two things: the organizational structure. Does it make sense logically? Do we have the right people reporting to the right areas? And then also looking at the skills. And that goes back to, here's what our current job descriptions say. And do we have people that meet that need? And so we didn't do this detailed staffing assessment, which I think could definitely be something looked at further by SANDAG. When you look at all the volume and you multiply that out by how many hours we need in a day, that's a very detailed assessment. We have performed those kind of things in the past, but you have to look at individual processes and roles and responsibilities that somebody does every day, every week, every month to determine the right size. But definitely some of the things that we're seeing could be done by, you know, having some other additional technical expertise on staff. So we're not coming to say you need to hire so many people or hire a particular person, but you do need to look at what technical expertise do we have lacking, and does that require new people, more training, or staff augmentation, whether there's temp staff and things like that. So there's a variety of things that we've identified that goes back to management to determine what's the best way to solve that problem, but definitely being able to see, do we have the right credentials to be able to do the jobs that are in front of us? And so that's kind of where we came up with those recommendations, and looking at current expectations that are set by the organization. Are we meeting them, and do we have gaps? And so that all funnels into those recommendations there.
Council member, we are doing assessment on each department. A good example is legal. We went and hired multiple new lawyers because definitely Amberlyn and her team were totally oversubscribed. And then we are also evaluating, and I know we're talking finance right now, but that's an example. We're evaluating in legal also which systems are going to help them become more efficient, right? The same we're doing with capital and resource management, number of PMs, all that. And we just have some very heart-to-heart conversations the last couple of days and weeks with finance, and they're preparing a proposed organizational structure within each department. So then we can evaluate it with systems requirements, policies, and how the different business structures work out. And we're going, those assessments for each departments are actually looking into that. The ones that we're doing internally, the one for toll ops is also coming up with that. We need to have a total kind of revamp of the organizational structure within our toll ops vision. So finance is in the process of being evaluated.
Sorry, just to cut to the chase a little bit. I mean, just from the perspective, I mean, I've been in your seat before, and you can always use more people, right? There's always space for more people. Work makes itself fill the available resources. But the question is, how do you measure, like, in the sense of, if we get better tools and better processes and better conformity, then this is the right size of people. So, for example, you take another agency the size of SANDAG, either budget or number of people, and it's running really well as you can expect. How many people are in that finance department or are doing these types of activities, right? And I don't know if we have that type of comparison, but it would be interesting to understand, are we really staffing crunched, or can we get this done with the staffing that we have? And I, as you're well aware, have full faith in our staffing ability, or the ability of our staff, I should say, and know that they work diligently and hard, and they have a very challenging problem in front of them. But just having the comparisons are helpful too. And then to riff a little bit off of the vice chair, just on the BITS director. So just so I'm clear, this person would have accountability and authority over the entire agency, right? So it's not like, I mean, the important part is to make sure it's like, oh, Department A says I'm going to go use ChatGPT for AI. Department C, oh, I'm going to use Perplexity for AI, and and just like they're going to go decide. There's someone that can actually decide is going to be in charge of the strategy for the whole organization. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Finance, legal, data, IT, HR are all organizational departments that provide a service to the different activities, but they're organizational and they oversee the entire organization.
Okay, great. And yeah, and hopefully you'll be able to get moving on the AI aspect too, because I guarantee you have people using it. It may not be a policy around it yet, but you have people using it. So the last question I'll put out there for now is just, this is a little bit different because it's a different analysis, but there's a nice, how would you say it, process behind how we do audits with respect to, it comes up with recommendations, very detailed, specific recommendations. And the management actually addresses each one of those recommendations. And then we as a committee say, which can be including, it has happened in the past, it's been a while, saying, well, we don't agree with this recommendation. We don't think we should do it for these reasons. We don't have that level of clarity here. We do have, historically, I've actually been around for a little while now. We've had a reasonable amount of turnover at all levels, including the board, including this committee, including even management. And so how do we make sure that we have a plan that's going forward that is consistent, that doesn't just get forgotten? So and at least have some visibility at maybe this committee level or the board level. It's just, is this going to come back? Are we going to be able to review the progress? Are we going to get a little bit more clarity? It's like, yeah, these recommendations from Weaver, we actually don't think are necessary because we can achieve them these other ways. I just think we don't need that now, but over time, how are we going to do that? And I know, Courtney, are you planning on addressing that?
I'd like to jump in on that. We did ask for a formal CAP response on this. It will be folded into the follow-up. We are going to meet with management just to go clarification, right? Based on the response, can we follow up on there? Is there more conversation that needs to be had? So we're in agreement. So we bring that level of clarity to you all because obviously you're responsible for making sure those recommendations go forward. So as you review, if you have more comments or thoughts on the recommendations.
So this will be tracked in our annual CAP
Yes.
progress plan? Okay, thanks. And then again, okay, great.
Great, thank you. I'm glad that my fellow committee members asked all the questions I had. It shows that I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, and thankful for their thoughtfulness. I will be very honest. When I started reading through this assessment, I panicked. I very rarely panic. I've worked in kitchens for 30 years. But as I read this, I was like, oh my goodness, I reached out to Courtney and we scheduled a follow-up conversation afterward because there was so much that came to light. There was so much that needed to be done. I've sat here for 3 audits and that anxieties exist, but this assessment really hit because there were so many pointed details and a lot of specificity of what needs to be done and trying to figure out how we're going to get there. But as I look back, I always try to find analogies to make me feel better about myself. And as we look towards the new year, we always talk about, are there resolutions we're going to make? And so I kind of looked at that and said, okay, well, we've had audits. Audits are the things the doctor tells you have to do. You have to eat right, lose weight, this and that. The assessment, and that, in my perspective, is something that we've decided to go to the gym. Now we're out reaching out to a personal trainer. And so the personal trainer is just beating us up. We're sitting there dying on the floor, sweating. We really don't like to eat our vegetables. We'd rather have the potato chips, which should be vegetables anyways. And so, we asked for what we got. And what we got was an amazing product. Something that really helped us have a roadmap for the future. There's no disagreements. It's hard because I'm looking at the assessment team. I'm looking at our staff, and there's nothing but cordiality. Obviously, there was mentioned that there was a lot of collaboration. One other word there was a lot of fortitude, which I can only imagine is absolutely necessary when you have people off on the outside coming in and checking on your business. And it's hard because you ever invite guests over and your house is dirty and you're apologizing for a dirty house. It's like, well, that's how you live all the time. The house isn't always clean. You have kids or whatever. But I think that the collaboration key was important to me. And I think that's what's going to help move this agency forward. the vice chair and I, we've been on SANDAG. Next year we enter our 4th year being on SANDAG, and what a ride it's been. The changes that Councilmember Zito mentioned, from staffing to leadership at the board and to our CEO and the other staff. You know, when the ERP came out, it was sold to us, this is an amazing system. It's going to implement it in 2 years. It's going to cover everything that we need to have done. Oh, and by the way, staff is going to do their regular jobs and implement this. And so, you know, at that point, I thought, wow, this is really cool. It sounds like a really big task. And I think the staff have done an amazing job, but I think there's hit a point where they've realized ERP is not everything. And it's okay to have multiple systems to run an agency in the correct way. You know, as far as finding other NPOs that are similar in scope and range, not even in sizes, the SANDAG, I think, is going to be hard fetched in this country to find, because it is such a unique agency. But I think everybody is in the same boat to say, hey, we're all going to dig in. We're going to do better, and we're going to gladly do it, because I think everybody does see that at the end of the day, this isn't something that shows weak spots. It shows that, hey, we should probably focus here and have some ability. And I think that as the fiscal year comes up for the next budget, as Susan mentioned, it's like, I would love to see how we're going to get that. And to Councilmember Zito is like, yeah, do we need more staff and certain, just to make these things get implemented much quicker. You know, when I got to SANDAG, we talked about all the 5 big moves or something like that, and all these wonderful things that we're going to go out, we're going to stick our flag on the top of the mountain and scream how great we are. And we're here 3 years later talking about how more we're going to be fiduciaries of public monies. You know, I probably said here, I said everywhere that we talk about grant funding, we talk about state funding, we talk about this or that. It's the same pot of money. It comes from our taxpayers. And they don't have a whole lot of choice in paying that. And so we have such a responsibility, and I'm grateful that the first assessment started with accounting and finance, because that's where it should start. I know there's other assessments that will come along that will help build efficiencies within the agency moving forward. But I just want to say thank you to all parties. And I know this is a document that's just going to go be put into a book, put on the bookshelf, and never looked at. I think this is a living document that staff is going to make sure that we move forward. And I know that Courtney and her team will make sure we come back to this and see where we're at, because that's part of it. But you know, like I'm grateful that now I understand the difference between an audit and assessment, and I'm not going to have that panic attack. And I really truly look forward to you know, seeing where this takes us as an agency. And I hope that the efficiencies that were outlined as they're implemented, they make staff's life a little bit easier, and that they can focus on some other stuff that really will help move the work of this agency forward. So that's the end of my comments. Are there any other comments that need to be made from the committee? No? Okay, and I think this is just something that. Okay. Okay. All right. So we're just going to receive this, and then it gets automatically forwarded onto the board for the thing. Okay. I was just told we're running short on time, and so we're going to be very diligent in what we're going to do. So if we can just, I want to skip down to item 4.3, which is our board policies. This is something that's been worked on for a while, and we'd love to start the new year getting this moved off. So I'm going to turn the time over to Courtney on this. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to acknowledge Amberlyn for working on the policies with me. We heard the conversation last time. We came back, we made the changes. This is a clean copy that hopefully is easy to follow the changes. We highlighted the conversations that were had, and then the deletions are in red, and the blue additions, those have come from the conversation over time. So this is a clean copy. So for board policy 39, I will stop my comments there, and just if we can go into questions, I think that would be the most efficient.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this one, Francesca?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public comment, Cesar Javier.
This is now the attempt or a kind of process, a treatment plant for unexpected pure byproduct. It comes out of research in the hope of empirical data, dissolution. And we welcome this. My question, still part of this, is, sorry, Mario, but this is some kind of a bullet that we just thought. How much does an incorporated city or incorporated city like City of San Diego chip in to SANDAG's in terms of money, etc.? And how many of these cities need help from SANDAG? Is the money of SANDAG, has that provision to assist them? Let us know. Please. We do not know their participation in terms of finance. Is the City of San Diego failing in that obligation, sir? We must know, because they are accountable. As what is clearly demonstrated or described, who's this beneficiary of mobility and circulation? It's the people. It's us. So if the City of San Diego, where we live in, fails,
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Are there any comments from the committee?
Not sure if I missed this last time or if this was added, but since it is talking about the responsibility of the audit committee on 3.1.6, I see we changed recommending to change the term oversee to monitor the work of the independent performance auditor. Can you riff on that a little bit and explain what you think that means is different?
Thank you, Member Zito. The difference, so oversee would mean that you would be involved in the planning of the work. So it was just a shift because of our independence. So that monitoring is a term that you are monitoring the work, but you would not be involved in actually planning the work. That was the.
Yeah, outside of and I just want to be clear, and so this will be I'm fine with the change, but this will be on the record that, we are involved with the planning of your overall work with respect to the audit plan, right? That's our objective, is to make sure we're auditing the right things. And so we do get involved with that. We just don't get involved with the details.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And then the other one I was kind of curious about was we also talking about the other policy update, sorry, 43 or 42. So on, 6.1.4, we X'd out, advise the members of the audit committee if something's going to start. I'm wondering if it's acceptable just to leave in saying we would advise that the chair would be advised of the audit committee at least, so it doesn't have to be the whole committee. Sorry, you're looking for it. It's
6.14 is
0.14. Yeah, the independent performance auditor may investigate any material claim. This is of, I think, the current one. Yeah, this is of it. And then you X'd out, shall advise the members of the audit committee. I'm just wondering if it at least should, or inform the chair or something like that. I just think it's useful. Unless you think there's a legal issue there.
what we had talked about before, that's why the consultation with the independent counsel would go on.
No, I understand, but I'm saying unless you think it's a legal issue for the chair to know what's going on. It's just having been a former chair, it's nice to know if something controversial might be coming up. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the policy. I know you as IPA tend to do that anyway. But I'm just wondering, is it okay to say that the chair would be informed that this is going to happen, just so the chair knows what's going on? Or if you have a concern on that?
I would prefer it not be in the policy, but I understand the request just
Okay.
to keep the chair informed.
Well, I'll leave it up to the current chair if he has anything, but thanks. Those are my two questions.
Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Zito. I had the same comment on that section, 6.14. I do appreciate the change, and it does reflect what we had talked about, which is how does the IPA, the Independent Performance Auditor, go about the need to subpoena somebody, right, and question them under oath. And it is clearly stated here that, yes, it would go through the process first seeking legal counsel, right? It does concern me, though, that now the audit committee feels, because it has been stricken out from this one paragraph, now it feels like the audit committee is completely left out. And my initial concern for the changes had to do with that checks and balances. And I understand the independence and the need for the independence of the work of the IPA. But I do agree with Mr. Zito that it would make me more comfortable if it is defined that the audit committee or the audit committee's chair does still have some insight into this type of activity for the purposes of that checks and balance.
May I recommend an edit? So on the last line, such consultation shall be documented between legal counsel and the independent performance auditor and the board chair notified.
I agree, yes, and communicate.
Board
with the
or,
board
sorry,
chair, something
board
like
or
that.
audit committee
Audit
chair?
committee chair.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks.
audit committee chair. Thank you. I would appreciate that. And I appreciate the work here. It does solidify what the discussion had been when we talked about this last. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? No, I appreciate the work that's gone, had the turnaround. I know that this is something that the audit committee has worked on previously, and I know the importance of getting it to the executive committee and to the board for their approval. I'm good with the amendment that was requested, a friendly amendment to that section. Other than that, I really appreciate the hard work and the diligence. We talked about this at our last meeting. There's a lot that went on. I appreciate whoever was able to get in the room and consolidate all the comments down into a document that is before us now. And I believe the changes really do clarify the role of this committee. And I think that some of the things we talked about as far as some of the requirements for public members and stuff like that are really going to help a lot for us. So, and it does show a little bit of variance compared to some of the other committees, because the audit committee is a little bit different now that I understand that. So with that being said, do I have a motion in a second?
I'll make a motion for the audit committee to approve the proposed SANDAG board policy number 39, given the addition that we just spoke about, as well as deletion of board policy 42 and the proposed new board policy 43.
I'll go ahead and second that. We'll go ahead and vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Fantastic.
Chair, can I make a comment for you all to consider? One conversation came up is the how laborious it is to apply for the audit committee membership, and that possibly maybe the clerk could look at that for a simpler process for audit committee members. I think that would assist in our process. So I just offer that as for you to consider, and
Okay.
that would help us.
Okay. We have a couple items left. Courtney, do you want to take 4.2 or 4.4?
I'd like to go into the cap, and then if we need to drop the other to
All right,
next
then we'll-
meeting.
We'll just take 4.2 our meeting in January and go ahead to 4.4. Turn the time over to Courtney.
Wonderful. Okay, I need the clicker now. Do I have it? Oh, whoop. Whoops. Okay, I am pleased to present the audit recommendation and corrective action plan quarterly status update. This was decided last year to bring forward a quarterly status update, and this is one of the requirements for the audit committee. I just want to note that. That's 3.1.3 in Board Policy 39 to review and oversee the implementation of corrective actions to address noted audit deficiencies. And it was member Wong Nickerson that suggested this. So just really happy to put this in to motion. I also want to call out Deshari Samuel, who did an outstanding job on putting together this quarterly status as she did the annual report. Recommendation status and definitions. You all helped us clarify this last time. So pending means an implementation has not begun or management has not provided evidence of OIPA for validation. Partly implemented is some element of the recommendation has been satisfied, but additional work remains. Implemented is OIPA has verified the satisfactory implementation of the recommendation, and dismissed, the recommendation is no longer relevant. Implementation is not feasible. When you look at the implementation date definitions, you'll see the planned implementation date. That's when the report was issued, what the date of implementation was. If management has revised it, you will see a revision, and the former date will have a strike through, so you can track how the recommendations are moving forward. If a recommendation is past due, it will be in red. So this is really provided, again, to provide you all with an understanding of how are things moving forward, how are they progressing in a snapshot. So the fiscal year issued is when the report or investigation was issued, how many recommendations occurred, whether they're open, implemented, dismissed, and then your percentage complete. We do want to note that we had one category change that we had to do. Previously, we had investigation recommendations listed in fiscal year 24-25 that should have been in 23-24. So we've corrected that. And those were 10 recommendations. Now we get to quarter one. So in quarter one, when we last left off in this story, it was at the annual review, and we were looking at 8 recommendations were under review at that time that had been provided to us that were for the previous fiscal year. So we wanted to make sure that you saw those are on the radar. We reviewed those since the annual report. And then we're focusing on this first quarter review. And in this one, we reviewed 5 recommendations. 3 of them are noted as implemented and 2 as partly implemented. On the fiscal year, fourth quarter for 2025, in the 8 we looked at, 1 is implemented and 6 are partly implemented. So we reviewed a total of 13 recommendations from the time we last talked about the corrective action plan. Management also requested date revisions. So over in this first quarter, we had 25 recommendations that were due on 9/30/25. 24 of them were due on 9/30/25. 1 was due on 8/31/25, and management requested revisions to those dates. And you'll see this slide shows you what report they relate to. We put details in the appendix, and I'll go over the appendix in a minute. Then we wanted to give you a look forward. We also wanted to give management a look forward to say, these are the recommendations that are due in October, November, and December. We have an agreement that once we receive the evidence that we will validate it within 30 days. So it's important that we get those evidence on time in order to meet our timeline to validate it. It's also important that if it is not being presented to us on time, that those dates and revisions and why the revision is occurring is provided to us so that we can have that information for you all. So when we look at Appendix A, this is the 13 recommendations that we looked at for this quarter, 8 of them for the previous fiscal year, end of fiscal year quarter, and then for 5 of them for the quarter. And you'll see that you have partly implemented or implemented. If it was partly implemented, we then worked with management and they provided a new implementation date. That's why you'll see for the partly implemented, they've provided 11/30 as their new implementation date. Then we had Appendix B, wanted to provide you all with as much information as possible on those 25. So this will show you the recommendations that were requested for date revisions, and it'll show you the history of those date revisions. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'll take questions.
I have a question, Courtney. Oh,
We need to go to public comment first. Do we have any public comment?
Thank you. We do have one public comment, Cesar Javier.
Thank you, SANDAG. We are complying with our doctor's prescription as we go through twilight years. As we reside in our community, West Bank, District 9, City of San Diego. Thank you for the presentation. It's a matter of time. And that time allocated for us to implement actions, corrective measures, looks like to us has a correlation with, correct us, environmental impact review reports. We understand that EIR is the key to go, no go on projects, whether shell, man, shelter, society, and the mission of SANDAG, which is mobility and circulation. We noticed that in our composition, organization, we do not have a clear-cut representation of the IPA, federal maybe, or state, or maybe the loose of the county, or the organic department of the city of San Diego and the rest of our cities. Could you clarify to us? Is this so, or we do not know? We are the public. We are at stake. This is your mission to keep us.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Member Dorsey? You had a question?
Courtney, on page 2, the recommendation status definition dismiss. So does that mean that you can't, implementation is impossible?
It's either implementation isn't possible or we evaluated it that it was no longer relevant.
Was there ever a recommendation that was ever dismissed?
We did, yes. In the annual report, we had a conversation because I think we had listed them as closed. It was a conversation with the members, and we really wanted you all, I think you just, it was recommended, the word dismissed, just to make it's evaluated. It's highly unlikely, that we do that. It really, in my experience, it's usually something that's stale and old and it no longer makes sense or systems have changed that you do it. We did in evaluating for the annual report some of the recommendations that were broader than the audit scope. And so we dismissed them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Nothing to do with OIPA, but I'll give you an example. ITALK had asked us to develop metrics for not levels of service, but to track how funding was doing with relief of traffic congestion, something like that. And Susan and Grace are more in tune with that. But we are not the owner operators of the highway system. Therefore, we don't go and put in metrics. We use the metrics that Caltrans develops and others, and we built upon that. But the recommendation had been that we needed to go and also develop some sort of infrastructure to follow more the level of service or how efficient the dollars were. So the team connected as much information existing instead of reinventing the wheel. So therefore, ITALK dismissed that recommendation, understanding the heavy lift to create a whole infrastructure of measurement.
Thank you, Mario. Any other comments? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Brazito.
Thanks. This is great. Really like the addition of the updated plan date, so that gives you an idea with partly implemented that it means there's still more work to do. I assume if we ever actually get to partly implemented and we just think we're going to be done, there'll be like, okay, no updated date, and we would have some explanation as to why they think they're, not going to do any more at that point. But I'm not sure we'll ever see that case. But anyway, it made it clear to me what that meant. This is more for a comment for just the annual review, but again, I still have a difficult time. Quarterly review is fine. I think difficult time at an annual review, just actually being able to have something that can clearly help us determine whether or not the agency as a whole is falling further behind or actually making progress, right? And are we generating more recommendations that we can be addressed? And, if so, clearly something needs to be done about that. I mean, certainly, historically we've been falling behind, but I believe recently we've been catching up, but I just don't know if that's the case. Having gone through the review last year and seen ITALK recommendations that are 7 years old, still not addressed. So just being able to understand where we stand with that as part of the annual review would be great.
Thank you, Councilmember Zito. No, it's great to see. I do have one question. When the plan date from implementation gets changed, does management provide a reason, or is there something that just documents that?
So that is, we have communicated with management that we want a reason for the change. So we're working with them to make sure that when the revision is requested, they're also providing us with the reason for the revision.
Okay, that's great. And, I think the one thing that I really like is even though there's so many recommendations, we got some implemented, some pending, some partials. The key that, the conversations are still happening. That's an important part because it's so easy to forget, to leave something behind it. But as long as those conversations are happening, and I hope that we don't get to have, things on the list that are 5, 10, 15 years old. But I think that, all staff is committed to making sure this stuff is working. And there are constraints, whether time, fiscal, or time staff. There's a reason. So, no, I appreciate that. The conversations are continuing to go on and that we get to review this and ask other questions. So any other comments? No? Well, thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for today. I don't believe there's no action. This is just for review, correct? Yeah, so this is just review. So this concludes our meeting. I believe our next meeting will be January 15th. Thanks everybody. Have happy holidays. Merry Christmas.